Welcome into 3 and Out presented by Comerica Bank. I'm Dannie Rogers, and I'm getting the top 3 headlines coming in to Week 7. Los Angeles Rams versus the Detroit Lions. It's going to be a great one, and no better person to get the opposition view than Myles Simmons of Pro Football Talk. He's going into his second season with them, but for 5 seasons, Myles, you were the lead writer for the Los Angeles Rams, writing for the team. That's what we go back to. Had so much fun back in 2017, Sean McVay's inaugural season. So I'm excited to see and get your take on this big matchup, Goff versus Stafford. Top 3 headlines we're going to talk about is Goff's return to LA. Of course, we're going to talk how the wide receiver core is acclimating to Matthew Stafford, and then how this defense is being built around who else than Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. So that first point, Myles, Goff's return to LA. You spent a handful of seasons with Jared Goff as the lead team writer, like I just mentioned. So what do you think the emotions are going to be like as Goff embarks back to the West Coast, which he has never left in his entire life?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting, Danny, because when you look at what Jared Goff was able to accomplish with the LA Rams, you go to Super Bowl 53, you have these different playoff appearances, even won a playoff game last season up there in Seattle. It really, I think, it could be a little bit emotional for him, but at the same time, you're going in there and you're still trying to get your first win. And I think for Jared Goff to be able to potentially get that first win against the team that let you go, and he's not going to say this because of course, why would he? But that probably is a little bit more extra juice. It would probably provide a little bit more fire going into this game. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how he approaches it from his standpoint in that offense with Anthony Lynn, but also how the Rams approach it from their defensive standpoint, because while there are so many players who, of course, know Jared Goff very well, Raheem Morris was not there with Jared Goff, of course, new defensive coordinator this year. So it's going to be really interesting to see the chess match between these two teams.
Okay, so that's the Goff perspective to LA. Have you heard any rumblings about the Stafford perspective of playing his former team that he was here in Detroit for 12 seasons?
Yeah, and you know what? He said after the game last Sunday that they beat the Giants that, he's going to approach this like every other game that he's ever had. And, you can say that. And I think that to an extent it's going to be true once, you get between the white lines and everything starts. But when you're lining up and you hear the national anthem and you're looking across the field and you see the team helmets and the team jerseys that you played in for that many years, I think that there's probably going to be some sort of, wow, I can't believe I'm on the other side of this. And it might be a little bit even different, if they were going to Detroit and if that game were at Ford Field. I think it would be an even bigger emotional thing. But fortunately, I guess from that standpoint, the game is going to be in Los Angeles. So yeah, I think it's going to be weird probably for Matthew Stafford to see those colors, those jerseys on the other side. But at this point, you got to feel like he is a big part of this Rams team and this Rams offense that has done so well through the first few weeks of the season.
They certainly have. I mean, Matthew Stafford, 4th in the league in passing yards, 3rd in touchdowns. How well has that wide receiver core acclimated to their new veteran quarterback out there in LA?
Yeah, it's really been interesting to see just that connection between him and Cooper Kupp especially. And I think people understood that Cooper Kupp is a very good wide receiver, but he has become one of the best in the league now with Matthew Stafford as the QB. And I think you saw a couple weeks ago when they were in Seattle that it won't just be Cooper Kupp, right? I mean, Robert Woods is also one of the more talented receivers in this league. And you saw that with the performance that he had up there against the Seahawks. And so you really have, I think, a good wide receiving core with a guy, Matthew Stafford, who can make all of the throws. And it really makes that offensive playbook that Sean McVay has unlimited.
For the first time in Jared Goff's career, he will have to go up against who else than defensive lineman Aaron Donald, one of the best defensive players in this league. He'll also have Jalen Ramsey thrown into the secondary in that unit as well that he'll have to throw against. So talk me through this Rams defense and how they've been able to build it around Donald and Ramsey this season.
Yeah, these guys are two of the premier players in the game. And I wouldn't go, I don't think it would be too much of a stretch to say that they are two of the best players in the game, right? Two of the 10 best players, if you're going to line up guys like that. I mean, Jalen Ramsey, what he can do from a defensive back standpoint is so special, not just because he can lock down guys outside at corner, but he can also go into the slot and he can play guys there and he can match up whenever they need him to. And then when you look at Aaron Donald, I mean, he can move all around the defensive line and he can really embarrass a center, he can embarrass a guard, and he can embarrass a tackle. And really, you shouldn't feel too bad if you're an OL and Aaron Donald embarrasses you, because he does it to everybody. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how Jared Goff approaches that, because look, he's gone against Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey in practice. But I mean, well, Jalen Ramsey could pick him off. Aaron Donald could never hit him before. And there are many, many times that Jared Goff has said, man, I'm glad that Aaron Donald is on my side. Well, that is no longer the case anymore. So, when you see what he's got to do, it's got to be, you got to identify where Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey are on every single play, because there are still playmakers, throughout the Rams defense. You got somebody like Taylor Rapp, who had 2 picks against the Giants last week. He was named NFC Defensive Player of the Week. So there are guys that can still make plays, but you have to know where those 2 guys are on every play, 99 and number 5, because if you don't, then, that can ruin your day.
Considering how familiar Matthew Stafford is with Detroit, and how familiar Jared Goff, you have Michael Brockers, how familiar they are with the LA Rams, what kind of game are we going to get Sunday from these 2 teams?
I really think it's going to be a competitive matchup. And, when you got a team that is still the last team without a win in the league, you're going to be a little more desperate to get that thing done as time goes by. And this is one of these games where it's interesting. If you go across the country, it can kind of do one of 2 things for a team, right? It can either galvanize them or maybe take them out of it. And I just feel like from everything that I've seen with Dan Campbell, it's probably going to galvanize this team as they go across the country, as they have to travel a long way. They're going to play in this really grand stadium, right? That SoFi Stadium is. I feel like that can really help spur on this team. And, you might want to rally around a couple guys, right? And you just mentioned it. Jared Goff knows the Los Angeles Rams very well. Michael Brockers knows the Los Angeles Rams extremely well. You might want to rally around those 2 guys and say, hey, let's make sure that we get you a little revenge game here. And on the other side, if you're Matthew Stafford, it's almost like you want to prove that you were right, to want to go to a team like the Los Angeles Rams. And in some ways, the Rams may want to prove that they were right to move on from Jared Goff. So I think that is going to bring kind of an interesting dynamic. And we'll know within the first few minutes, the first quarter, let's call it, how competitive this game is going to be, I think. And I really do think that it's going to be a good one.